Welcome. We have another small town girl with us today. Michelle Jones is joining us from Denton, Texas. Michelle, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
But you haven't always been a small town girl, I understand, so tell us about that.
No, I actually grew up in Austin, but Austin was a bit smaller than it is now. I've been in the Denton area for about 30 years. So 30 years ago, Austin wasn't quite the size it is now. And at times, I feel like Denton's kind of a beginning Austin a little bit with its music scene and some of its culture and college town aspects. I've enjoyed it, but I did grow up in Austin, a much bigger city. So.
Well, we're still about 100,000 people, so I think most people would think of us as small town girls in Denton.
I think so.
Okay. Well, what attracted you to Denton and small town life?
Well, when I relocated to this general area, I knew I didn't want to practice law in the Big D, in the Dallas area or big towns. So I enjoyed the smaller aspects of small town, no traffic, getting to know the individuals and the lawyers that practice in the town better. So that was really what I was looking for, a smaller experience where you'd also get more authority earlier on. I think if you start out in those big firms in downtown Dallas, you're relegated to kind of the bottom for a long time. So I was looking for a better opportunity.
So you found more opportunity in a small town than in a big, tall building?
I did. I really had watched that. I'd practiced a couple of years before I came this direction, and I really saw opportunities for lawyers in smaller firms and smaller areas to get more experience right away. So.
Well, Michelle's been a good friend for a long time, but I know that she has a very unique practice. Why don't you tell our guests what kind of law you practice?
Yes, I practice eminent domain condemnation law, which is its own beast. It's a very small niche practice where I represent landowners when the government is acquiring their property for highways, power lines, gas pipelines. In our area, certainly that was a boom when the gas pipelines came through. But I represent landowners trying to maximize their recovery from a condemning authority when their property is acquired.
So when I think about, property being condemned, I've got a mental image of, it being boarded up because it's not up to code. But you're talking about something else, right?
Yes, I'm talking about when, and that's a benefit in kind of a small town on the edge of growth that's been expanding. It's when infrastructure is being expanded, roadways are being widened or created or improved. Power lines, we all know the grid. The last a year ago, I guess we all had some issues with our electric grid. That's important. They build power lines. Back many years ago when the Barnett Shale and in our energy sector, they were trying to get gas to market, and so they built a lot of gas pipelines. And so all of those projects require people's property to create that infrastructure. And so those condemning authorities have to acquire property from landowners to build that infrastructure. The question generally is, how much money do they owe that landowner for taking their property? Most of the time, they're going to have the power and the right to take that property. It's just a question of what do they owe the person. And obviously, we believe that they owe them dearly most of the time, and that's what we're trying to maximize for a landowner.
And is it just the government that can take the property away in Texas?
Not in Texas. There are private, well, it's changed over the years, but they restricted that several years back. They exempted a few stadiums and other projects that were in the works, but for the most part, it can't be for economic development. But it doesn't have to be the government. It can be a private entity such as a gas pipeline company or a private power company. They have the authority, or water companies at times are able to condemn property, but they have to be clothed with a public need and a public necessity to take the property.
Okay, and so We probably don't have time to go into all the detail about how they go about taking it away, but you end up having appraisers and fighting about what the property's worth.
Yes, and appraisers are probably the biggest expert that we're going to use all the time, because condemning authority has an appraiser. They're going to have an appraiser that appraises your property. And there are appraisers that work for condemning authorities, and there are appraisers that work for landowners, and their opinions are typically different. So you should hire an attorney that's going to help you select a qualified appraiser that can evaluate the value of your property.
And how would a property owner even know if their property's being taken?
They're going to, in Texas, and actually since I think 2011, they've made them send out plenty of notice. You're going to know when they come and approach you to survey your property. They're going to appraise your property. There are multiple steps in the process. It depends on which condemning authority is taking the property as to exactly how that process goes. Pipeline companies can design their project without any oversight. Power line projects require the Public Utility Commission to approve routing, and so you're going to know long before they appraise your property or survey your property that you're going to be acquired. TxDOT, they also hold public meetings and usually send out advance notice. But when you really know it's happening is when somebody's surveying your property and appraising your property for a project, and then they make you an offer.
And at some point they can file a lawsuit, right?
They will. But don't let them get to that point. Reach out before they file their lawsuit, because in Texas, condemnation is a two-step process, and there's an administrative phase that is the first step in the lawsuit that they file. But they'll have made you an offer, and then they take it to the next step by filing a lawsuit.
So why not just wait till the lawsuit's filed before you hire an attorney? I mean, doesn't it cost money to hire a lawyer?
You know, in this area, typically attorneys will represent you. I represent my landowners on a percentage of what I get for them over their offer. That offer is theirs. I don't take any part of that. They always keep their offer. I represent them on a percentage of what they get over that. And so it doesn't cost you any money. And often we're here to advise people. We talk them through the offer process. And if it's close, sometimes they can actually work that out on their own. We'll help them with the paperwork and just get them a little bit of money. But most of the time, they have not been offered enough for what's being taken from them, and we can significantly increase that. And if they reach out early enough, you can be prepared for the first phase, have your expert lined up, not make mistakes as far as refinancing, getting an appraisal that's not helpful to you, contesting your property taxes that year. You may not want to do that if you're going to ask for a lot of money, because that's a public record. There are just things that you could do that would hurt your ability to ask for more money.
And are there times when you avoid the lawsuit altogether if you hired early enough in the case?
Absolutely. Depending on the condemning authority, depending on what's at stake and what's being acquired, there are opportunities to resolve it short of the lawsuit. But I often tell people that the clients I have that make the most money hang in the longest. It's pretty painless. It's not a custody dispute or a family law fight. You can pretty much turn it over to your lawyers and let them work with the experts and work through the process and take your time. Let it play out. There's no harm to you, and it's not urgent. And sometimes my clients that are really patient, patience can pay. So pay the most.
Well, tell us what other kinds of law you practice.
Well, we have focused our practice probably in the last 20 years primarily on eminent domain, and we do a few related real estate transactional work, but it's mainly condemnation, eminent domain. That is our main practice.
And so why did you decide of all of the areas of law to just focus on this little tiny area?
It's interesting how, life works out. I actually started practicing law at the Attorney General's office in Austin. condemning property. So I was in the section that represented the Texas Department of Transportation in acquiring property. So I learned that, got a lot of experience in doing that, and then transitioned to this area. And when I first got here, I was not able to solely focus on that area of practice. But over time, it's just been a great area to see the growth coming and see the projects that have come through. And it's been just wonderful to be able to focus on that area of law. I enjoy it.
So you've switched sides.
I have. And I've done a little bit in my private practice. I've represented a few condemning authorities over the years. But at this point in time, it's pretty much just representing landowners.
Now, is that a pretty small club? In other words, do you run into the same folks over and over again?
It really is. You're right. It is a small network of lawyers. I know the lawyers on the other side. I know the lawyers that do what I do. I know the experts that people hire. If I get an appraisal in, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to know who did that appraisal and what appraisal firm they're with, because it is it's a niche. It's a small area of practice, and we all know one another, and it makes everyone behave a little bit because you're going to see that person again most of the time. You don't want to burn bridges, and because you are going to face them again or come across all those parties one more time. So
in that first phase of the condemnation before the lawsuit, special commissioners who are just regular people are appointed to decide the value, right?
Yes, they are.
And is knowing those folks, is that a benefit to your client?
Oh, I think so. I think seeing those people over and over again, you gain credibility with them. I think they know that you understand what you're talking about, and they've seen you before. And I think that can be, in Denton, I feel like really we know those commissioners well. And feel comfortable in front of them and have a good reputation presenting our cases to them. That is just a first phase for people, though. Either side can object to that, and it moves forward to litigation.
Right. Well, once a property owner's been given notice of that their property's being considered for a condemnation, how would they go about finding a lawyer who specializes in eminent domain?
Well, it is important, I think, to find that attorney that specializes in eminent domain. And I always tell people to seek referrals. So I feel so comfortable referring. If I hear of somebody that's had a catastrophic injury, I'm going to turn to Grace Weatherly because I know that's what you do. You're board certified in that area. And so I tell people to seek referrals. They're going to get I think over the years this has changed, and they get just a tremendous volume of mailers and solicitations from attorneys that are looking to do that work for them. And it's very important that you pick someone who's done it, knows it, is not dabbling. Don't get a general practitioner who does a lot of wills and divorces, because they're not going to have the knowledge of experts and people to choose from to assist in the case and how to work the case to make it as valuable as it can be. So I think you can seek referrals from other lawyers. I think you can turn to your real estate brokers. We've worked with a lot of them over the years. I wouldn't recommend that you hire a real estate broker to take you through the process. And they also send out information and try to work with landowners. But the only thing they can do is negotiate the price through the very first phase. They can't represent a landowner in a commissioner's hearing. They can't take it past a commissioner's hearing. They can't help them withdraw their funds out of the court. So there's limits to what they can do. So their goal is to find a number and a value that can be obtained prior to all those other steps, because they can't take you past those steps. So consult brokers about which attorneys to hire, like brokers that that maybe have done work for you, but don't necessarily hire a broker to handle your case.
So what if you have a broker who helps you negotiate the value of your property, you still need to go hire a lawyer to get the case finished?
Right. Yes, and they can only negotiate it if they're doing that prior to any of the lawsuit process. And If it involves an easement or a document, they can advise you on the details of the document, and those can be very, very critical to your future and your property's future, is what terms are allowed in the document through an easement. So you'd have to have somebody review that for you or take it through the lawsuit phase.
Sounds complicated.
I've enjoyed it, let's put it that way.
Well, that's great. Well, in Texas, we're one of the states that has board certification, and not every state does. But I know that, when clients are looking for a personal injury lawyer, they can look at Texas Board of Legal Specialization's website to find a board certified personal injury lawyer. But they don't have a board certification in eminent domain.
They don't, unfortunately. So it does it's a buyer beware a little bit. I think you should check out people's websites. Also talk to bankers. We work with a lot of bankers because they've refinanced a property or they've helped somebody, we have relationships with a lot of local people that are knowledgeable in real estate, and they send us referrals. We have landowners that send us referrals. They're neighbors that have been condemned. So there's not a handy way to sort out people that dabble in this area and people that focus in this area, because there's not a board certification in condemnation or eminent domain.
And if you just sought out somebody who's board certified, say in residential or commercial real estate, is that helpful to know? Can you use that to find out if they do condemnation?
No, typically we work with a lot of those people because they'll refer us these cases. Mm-hmm. So they're not bad people to ask, but most of the time the people board certified in real estate are going to be transactional based attorneys, and they're not going to be comfortable in a litigation type setting or in a condemnation type setting. Again, they're not necessarily bad to ask for a referral. We get a lot of referrals from title company lawyers and transactional lawyers that focus on commercial and residential real estate, but they focus in it on a transactional basis.
So here we have a super specialized, very experienced trial lawyer doing eminent domain work for over 25 years in a very small town. And that leads me to ask you, Michelle, do you think small town girls get stereotyped?
Oh, I think we absolutely can. I think there's a perception that, if you're not working in the big D or in a big town, that you can't be as experienced or knowledgeable as someone who is in those larger venues. However, again, I think you have more opportunity to handle the cases from beginning to end when you start in a smaller area. And I've just done thousands of condemnation cases over the last 20 years. And I don't know that I would have had that ability at a bigger firm or in Dallas. So to me, it's been great. It's been a benefit. But there can be that stereotype that is associated with being in the small suburbs of the big town.
Well, before we close, tell our guest, what do you love most about small town living?
Oh, lack of traffic. No. I love many things about the small town. It was great to be a mom and have my own practice in a small area where I could, have a case in the morning and make a ball game in the afternoon, or all those things were just lovely. And the collegiality of the lawyers in our small town. You know everyone. You can refer to each other. So it was the friendship I developed with you, and it's just been great. It's been a lovely place to have your own firm and practice, as well as personally live and enjoy a life in a small town.
Well, civility and professionalism seem to be lacking in a lot of areas in our society right now. But you think that the level of professionalism in small town practice of law is higher than that in the big city?
I think so. I think because it's kind of in the same vein as my area of practice. You see these people, you're around them, you're going to see them at a restaurant, you're going to see them at a family event, at church, at a kid's game, you're going to come across each other. So it's hard to be as nasty and uncivil as it might be if you didn't see them very often. Same thing in my practice. It's just nice to come across the same lawyers all the time, because it does, again, help with the civility, because you know them, and so you can be fierce advocates for your client without being uncivil. So I think that's a benefit to a small town for sure.
Thank you so much, Michelle. We've enjoyed having Michelle Jones here, Denton, Texas, condemnation, eminent domain expert. And, I just love having professional women from small towns on this show. Thanks so much for joining us.